Trauma can also be like victim-based, because you can also say there is something in my past. Let's say your parents abused you, like a very obviously significant trauma, and that's why I'm like this, which also abdicates your responsibility over right now and gives it to some past events. I think trauma is real, but if you focus on it way too much, it can also mean giving up your power to that. So the topics that I sent you for today, one that I'm really passionate about is the shadow of activism, or shadow of activism. Shadow side of activism, which I think is quite relevant for free cities, yes? We're not rolling yet, are we?
Yes, we are.
We're rolling.
Yes, we're rolling, always. There's no start or end to this podcast.
Yes, I learned the hard way last time. It was 20 minutes of me talking about plastic bottles.
Well, and I mean, we missed that. The listeners and viewers missed that. You're actually drinking out of a glass bottle.
I feel like a VIP.
I'm still killing myself with microplastics, but I bought you a Vincent.
Vincent, much appreciated. Vincent Calles.
Right.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, we've got a few things. I like these were your suggestions. I've written them down here. Shadow side of wanting to save the world. Pet peeve of mine, actually, as well. Well, not necessarily amongst people on our side, people on the other side, but we should probably look at it from our side, shouldn't we? Yes. How we think and feel about money and what it says about us. Another one that I would like to be very self-reflective about, because I do have an interesting relationship with money, I think. That I certainly don't feel like I have, I go through phases, like when I was younger, I lived in abundance forever, just by not thinking about it. And then when I started thinking about it, as I got more responsibility, it became more of an issue to sort of, and the relationship changed, interestingly, anyway. And then you've put here trauma, unhelpful narrative building, and how to transcend it. They're all good. All right. All interesting. Should we start?
It's also a lot. It's quite a lot, so we may not cover all of it.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge topics. I could talk for 3 hours about each.
Oh, good. Well, let's do that then. Let's start with the shadow side of wanting to save the world. I'll start. I'll give you my pet peeve.
All right.
I mean, like, to sum it up, I suppose, and this isn't just the other side of the spectrum. This is everyone. That there are a group of people that basically want to save the world because they haven't saved themselves. Is that it in a nutshell?
100%. Oh, yes. Okay. All right, so that topic down. Moving on. Next one.
Right, move on. Okay. But let's go into the mechanics of it then, because I know how it manifests. But on the other side, because you see it and you're like, oh God, it's so obvious. But it's maybe a bit less obvious amongst ourselves and the ranks of our own people.
I mean, we do tend to have blind spots, I think, when it comes to ourselves. It's always so easy to see what the other people are doing wrong. But to backtrack a little bit, activism, I define it as any endeavor in which we set out to right the wrongs of this world, what we perceive them to be. And it can be literally anything from fighting the deep state to, climate change, to the patriarchy, to people who eat meat, to politicians, to big pharma. Whatever you perceive as this entity that it's somehow limiting your capacity to live your life to the fullest, be happy, that's who we set out to fight. And my position on that is that basically what you just so eloquently summarized is that the most important work any activist does is on themselves, the inner work. And until you've really done that, any work you do in the external world is not going to be effective or intelligently informed and as impactful. Because unless you do the inner work, you are going to be projecting your issues onto this enemy. And this enemy is a very seductive entity and a very convenient entity to have, because they are everything that is wrong with the world. It is certainly not me. And I need to change something about that in order to feel okay inside.
And they also, I think, allow you to relinquish your own responsibilities.
100%.
Right. Projecting. Now, there's a word I really like. We all do it. Some of us are aware that we're doing it and try and stop ourselves doing it. And some people just project for a living, don't they? And once again, the trick is in, like I always think about this whenever I get into an argument with my wife. It's always like the moment I start analysing what she's doing, it's me doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, because I'm doing it as a way to sort of like cope with the fact I'm doing it. There, look, you're doing that. And actually, all I'm doing is noticing who I am, which is basically what I think projecting is. It's like the opposite. Well, put it this way: the opposite of projecting is learning lessons from life. Like when you interact with someone and they do something that affects you, you've got two options in dealing with it. One is to feel victimized by it and respond or react in a terrible way, and the other is to either learn, just notice it, understand it, and make a kind of informed response. But come on, tell me about what you know about projecting.
So in this specific context of activism, let's say somebody wrongs you, does you an injustice, and a part of you really wants to harm the other person, right? Just wreak havoc and like have that revenge. But you can't admit that to yourself because you're a good guy. So you're going to say, no, I wish them all the best and I'm moving on. But a part of you is still there that is out for blood. And unless you accept that part and you're aware of that part, you are going to be projecting that part onto somebody else. You're going to say, there is this bad guy out there out to get me. And again, it can be the deep state, it can be whoever you identify as the enemy. But really, they are reflecting to you this unrecognized part of yourself. And what you're saying is this kind of like self-inquiry and self-reflection and a deep introspective where you're like, where is this feeling coming from? This feeling that somebody's out there to fight me. Really, I'm the one fighting. I'm the one who's engaging in conflict, and I see the world around me as unsafe because there is a part of me that wants to be this tyrant, right? That wants that revenge. So really the path to healing that and to kind of making yourself whole is just recognition. Asking yourself, what is this? And saying, I want revenge. I am the bad guy. There's a part of me that is evil. There is a part of me that doesn't want to grant other people freedom. And maybe that's why I'm seeing that in the outside world. So it is really something inside me that I'm projecting on the outside. Because really the world, when you think about it, it just is. Any narrative is only coming from outside. From us. Everything that happens in the outside world really is neutral. It is just happening. Let's say there is a new directive that comes from the government. You can take it as it is, or you can spin a million stories about it, how they're out to get you, they're out to get your kids, and they're out to control your life. But if it's charged with this fighting energy, with this state of warfare from you, that is the part of that you're projecting.
In that instance, though, the government might well be out to get you. Actually out to get you. And I think a lot of what they do is very vindictive, very miserly, very, very, not nice, basically. So how does it work when you see someone? Maybe I'll word it like this. I've written down a question here. What is injustice? Like, what is it? Like, how do you know what injustice really is? How do you define injustice? Because if you track it back far enough, I suppose in a way there's no such thing as injustice, is there, if the world just is?
Yes, that's what I mean by everything is actually neutral, because everybody has their perfect reason for doing something, and if you interpret it as injustice, that is only an interpretation. There's another person who could be looking at the exact same situation and they would see it as perfectly fine. So there's that level of subjectivity that it's almost like infinite. Every situation you could look at and see it as just, unjust, whatever. But it is important to realize that these are interpretations, these are our personal narratives, and it's kind of like what you said about, getting into an argument with your wife. you're spinning a story about it. And it's ultimately a story that is going to serve you. Because how rare is it for somebody to say, I'm looking at this situation and I see that I'm wrong about it? It's the absolute minority of all of our interactions. Usually our ego has a way to protect itself, for self-preservation, and to always say, I'm right. So you're always going to interpret it in a way that you come out as either the injured party, which is a very convenient position to be in, again, because you're the victim. So nothing is your fault, right? You're powerless. And the injustice being done to you is, again, a very seductive position to be in, and very addictive also for life. Because if you're always a victim, you have abdicated your responsibility, and that is way easier, actually, to exist than the opposite, which is accepting radical responsibility for the stories that you have in your mind, for the way you live, for your health, for your state of mind, for your life situation. And I would argue that the ultimate libertarian position is to have this absolutely radical responsibility, but including saying, I'm responsible for the level of freedom that I have. I can't expect this perfect life, without having full responsibility for its shape.
Oh God, so many things there. First of all, one observation, talking about the victim position. It's also the cheapest position to take. It's the easiest, cheapest, most bang for your buck position, which is why I think we see it so ubiquitously at the moment. If you don't point out why putting in the work is worthwhile, the victim situation is the easiest one to go to, that gets the most of what you think you need. But actually, in the long term, it's the short term. It's a low type reference position as well, obviously. Secondly, talking about telling yourself a story which serves you. I do that a lot, but I do it a lot, and I don't think it's necessarily all bad. I put a silver lining on absolutely everything, and it allows me to walk through life with a spring in my step. I think we've spoken about this before. Nothing super terrible has ever happened to me. I've never had my child die. You haven't really been exposed to anything absolutely tragic. But when something does go wrong, my instinct is to frame it in the context of, well, what am I getting out of this? As in, what am I learning out of this? What will the future hold that will benefit from this, etc., etc. And then lastly, we've got to talk about radical responsibility. I love that word. I started saying that myself, a couple of years ago. I'd never heard anyone say it, never read about it. I just realized that's what I was doing. Obviously now I realize it's something that people have been talking about for a long time, but it's the only way to live, really, I believe, in the end. It's a struggle, obviously, because it's very easy to get tricked into forgetting that you're responsible for absolutely everything, basically, because, it's something you do have to remind yourself. And I don't think it actually resides in your head either. I think it's a kind of feeling in your heart. You know what I mean? So if you're in thinking mode and you're interacting with the world for weeks on end from up here, you can really forget that side, and that's where all the victimization then starts appearing. But about radical responsibility, take it to the extreme. Somebody murders your daughter. How do you take responsibility for that?
Well, the first step is you are responsible for your reactions, for your emotional reactions also. And because they will be the first. Before you take any action, you have to process what's actually happened and analyzing the situation. So after, of course, the emotion will be obviously grief, all these really intense emotions that the first step would be to accept whatever comes and not try to suppress the emotions. Because you mentioned earlier, I don't remember the context that it was, but you said we have to suppress whatever comes up, maybe this victim mentality. And I don't think it's about suppression, it's really about acceptance, kind of being with what is in the emotional realm. because suppression kind of leads to, I think it leads to problems down the road. So whatever comes up in your body, and it can be hatred, it can be this desire for revenge, which would be perfectly justified. You just have to accept it. I'm the bad guy now, I'm out for blood. And once you've let those emotions like fizzle through you and maybe settle, then you can come to a place of more rational course forward. I think what would be a wrong reaction in this scenario would be to get immediately just reactive and want to remedy the situation. You kind of have to be with yourself first. Of course, what you gave is an extreme situation, but let's say something like somebody dings your car. Yes, it happened to me last week. Come to the car, it scraped. Somebody obviously like scratched it and drove off, didn't leave a note or so. So what I do first, I feel really angry and I felt it was really unfair. I was with that for a couple seconds, and then what you have to do is just accept reality. Okay, I have a scratched car now. Another great example, my friend was just flying back from London, missed his flight, all right, stuck in London for another day and has to spend more money on a flight. And he was telling me, we were talking about this on the phone, and he said, I knew that the first thing I have to do is just accept reality. Because you can be in the state of fighting what is and thinking, oh, I should have done this, I should have got an earlier connection, and why did I oversleep, etc., etc. But that just promotes your suffering at the end of the day. First step is always to accept what is, be with the emotions that come up, and then you will take a more intelligent course of action. But I think a lot of people don't have the capacity to be with their emotions fully. I think the reason is going back to childhood again, because a lot of the times we don't allow our kids to be with their emotions, especially if a kid has a temper tantrum. You see the parents rushing in and either with a slap or a lollipop, right, which is both ultimately the same controlling mechanism, you want to end it. So you don't permit the child to experience a full arc of emotions. And in that case, we're in danger of bringing up children that are uncomfortable with their emotions. So if they miss a flight, somebody scratches their car, they are in such discomfort and they immediately jump to action. Do something to remedy the outside situation, as opposed to let's just stand here for 2 minutes, take it in, I'm feeling really angry and frustrated, and it will pass, because emotions have an energetic print, they go, and then they fizzle away, and then you're okay again.
Here you go then. What if you do all that and you sit with your emotions, and when the time comes to make your decision on what you're going to do, you decide upon very consciously revenge? Is that good or bad, or not anything?
You know, I'm leaning towards like moral relativism in this case, because it truly, truly depends. If you deem that, let's say that person that killed your child is legitimately a threat to society, and let's say the powers that be are not going to neutralize him, and you take it upon yourself, I think there could be a very good argument for doing that and saying that is totally justified. On the other hand, in the exact same situation, you say, I don't want this karma of killing another person. That is just, I know that I would feel way more miserable down the road. So in this case, I would say if you sit with yourself, you undertake this deep inquiry, and you go with your intuition for what is the right course of action for you, that will be the right course of action. What will not be right is if you jump to remedying the situation right away.
First thing to point out was it was a woman that killed my daughter, not a man.
Right.
You said he.
How statistically improbable is that, though? Let's be real here. I was going by averages.
Come on, you've got a he, she, it. You can't say it was a man.
Perfect. Okay.
I'm going to call you out.
Caught me out there. No problem.
What was I going to say? Justice. That's what I was thinking when you were saying that. I think that justice, I don't know, is justice much more of a male trait than a female trait? You know, that kind of, the scales of justice. They're strong in me, put it that way. I feel very morally obliged to even out the scales of justice whenever I see them out of Kante. You know?
I don't think that's humanly possible to do that. I don't think that's our role as humans to impart absolute justice, because that is such a big ask, and we don't see all the variables. I don't think that the human mind is capable of doing something like that. So I had a good friend here in Prague, and he was a lawyer. He passed away. He was a lawyer for many, many decades, and he always said, when you come to the justice system, don't expect justice, expect a decision. It's not about, justice is that's why we say divine justice. Only a higher power could impart perfect justice. If it's humans, it's always going to be flawed or imperfect.
Interesting. I mean, but I suppose personal justice, though, when it's adjudicated inside, isn't it easier to observe? Like, I don't think, for example, an outsider could pass justice on my moral landscape in the same way I don't think the government should pass justice on a number of things about me. You know, we know best for ourselves. And as far as justice goes, I mean, let's go back to this maniacal woman that's killing young children. God damn her. You know, I would feel morally obliged to redress the balance and kill her. You know, it'd be actually, when I think about it, if it was a woman, it'd be much more difficult. Let's go back to it being a bloke.
Let's make it a man. Yeah, that feels right. I can be done with a murdering guy.
I would be that guy who shoots the guy in court, who just sneaks a gun into court, and I have no concern for what happens to me. I don't care. I have absolutely no care.
But what about, so then you go to jail. So then your family has lost a child and they've also lost a father.
Well, yeah, but in the case of the one I'm thinking about, it was his only child, so...
But you say yours. You said it was your child.
Okay. It was a bad example.
So your wife has lost a child and now she also loses a husband because you go to jail for life.
Well, I'd do it secretly then. I'd get away with it. It can't be that hard to get away with a murder, can it? Especially when it's someone that no one wants alive, you know, like some murderer. I don't know. I would put it this way. Here's the thing, right? And you notice this. I think I noticed it anyway, about even hanging around with libertarian people, with anarcho-capitalists, with anarchists, all these kind of people. Over the years, you start to realize that there are these rules that people follow, and quite a large number of them are not your rules. They're someone else's rules. You never woke up one morning and thought to yourself, I should always cross the road at one of those, Pelican Crossing, you know. But, you know, you can take that to in a lot of places. And I think that's what... I mean, and I was talking to someone about this the other day. When you actually get into that, you realize there's a very fine line between those thoughts and basically criminals who basically think the same thing. A criminal thinks, do you know what, like this rule about not stealing, it's, you know, like if no one's enforcing this, or if I don't believe in this rule, it doesn't exist. So you can just walk into a shop, pick stuff up and leave, or, you know, but we think what we do, we go down that same route with various rules that we realize are imposed from the outside. I'm not saying stealing and these kind of things, because there's obviously some kind of inherent reason for these rules that probably does go, I don't know. Of course.
And I think it ties into, again, like radical responsibility, because I don't follow rules that are out there and that make no sense to me, then I don't respect those. I find, you know, my life is not defined by a set of external rules. It's really my internal rules, because I'm responsible for my actions. So I can't say I did this because somebody told me not to. I did this because I chose not to, because it's wrong. And of course, a lot of the rules that we have in society make perfect sense for living with other people, like private property. I mean, I don't need rules that tell me not to steal. I would just find that morally wrong. And to abdicate your self-responsibility to like the legislative code in each country, I mean, that would again be like giving up your responsibility for life.
I suppose then if you, in the case of the criminal, they are viewing rules as things that are outside of themselves. And when it comes down to it and they look inside and they go, well, that rule doesn't exist in me. It's the golden rule, isn't it? Isn't there one rule to rule them all? It's the golden rule.
Right, don't do unto others.
Yeah. Is that pretty much it? Is that the one that's evolved? That's the sort of evolutionary moral that evolved amongst us.
I suppose so. I suppose that really does govern human interaction. It's like the healthy rule. I think that all humans evolutionarily also are programmed to abide, because we are tribe animals. So we're programmed to get along. If you're outside of the tribe, you die in the wilderness. So you have to get along with others. And that is the easiest. It's actually the foundation of empathy also. Because the way that I feel, I imagine another person will feel a similar way. And I see them as an individual with also their own rights. So I respect that. So it's a foundation of living in society, would be the golden rule, yes.
Okay, let's go back to the dark side of activism.
Yes, please.
Are we even activists? I mean, what is activism?
Yeah, I think, as I said, it's to me, it's righting the wrongs of the world. So if you see there's something wrong and you take it upon yourself to fix it, whatever it is, and it usually means some sort of like society-wide problem. It doesn't mean that the supermarket sells expired eggs. I mean, that would be a very small scale, but we're talking about kind of global or social problems. So once you set out to fix them, you are becoming an activist when you're putting your energy towards this endeavor.
So we are activists then? Like,
I wouldn't really consider
because it's quite
myself
a negative connotation, really, isn't it?
Well,
I think
it has the connotation of the angry activist nowadays. Yes, that's the one that I would call the unconscious activist. Because if it's something that is coming from anger, it's coming from the ego, it's coming from projection, as we discussed. And that is activism that I think in the long run is going to do more harm than good. And it is easy to see it on the quote-unquote other side, like you have the woke activists. But I do think the libertarian movement is not entirely immune to this also, especially because a lot of people that join the libertarian movement, they're extremely intelligent people. It has nothing really to do with it, but they're very much in their head, I would say. As I interact with a lot of these people, they are very analytical and logical thinkers, which is a brilliant trait to have. And it has with it the challenge that you're like heavily mind-centered. And you are not as connected to your intuition and the somatic experiences in your body, which I would argue is an essential skill to have if you're going to go into what I call conscious activism, which is the one that is connected to these abilities and not so heavy on the logical side.
I've got it. You see this so much in the presentations of libertarians at conferences, and I can't remember who it was. I had a conversation with someone a few years ago. We went to Portugal to Students for Liberty, and someone was talking about how to reach out to people and how badly libertarians do it. And he gave two examples. One was literally two ways to basically talk about the same thing. Number one was to get up on stage with a bunch of graphs and say, look, as people do this, they get poorer. We should be changing this. We should be doing about this, which is how the libertarians do it. Yeah. Bunch of graphs. The other one is, and people on the sort of left side of the spectrum do this much better when you see them get up and speak. It's like, you see this lady who lives in downtown wherever, she's struggling. She's struggling to get her thing, and that's the way to sell this idea to someone. It's not to show them a graph from your mind. Yeah, it's true. You can't convince someone with a graph. You might be able to, actually, you can convince other libertarians almost certainly, or other kind of cerebral people, but it doesn't work very well.
The other thing I just noticed about what you said is if you are in a position like this, you're also entering an interesting triad where there is the victimizer, which would be the government. There is you as the savior, and there is the old lady as a victim. And whenever you have the victim, and that in this case it's not you, but it's the old lady, you are also you're out there to save victims, and it can be the Palestinians, it can be the poor people, it can be women, it can be Ukrainians, whoever you're also reinforcing the victim position because you're arresting them in this state of victim. You're saying they're so powerless that me on this white horse have to ride out to battle and save them. And again, how good does that feel to the ego?
Of course.
I am the savior, and I know what is right to do, and I will fight the big dragon in order to save these helpless victims.
I think it's called self-aggrandizing.
Yes.
And it's very prevalent amongst, I think the meme is sort of relatively rich, middle-class white women in America, aren't they? They're the worst. And it's actually, it's like what do they call it's I think you get a version of racism which is exactly the same. I think is it soft racism or something like that, which is basically you under you're viewing a class of people as in need of your help,
right?
Which is what you're trying to not do. You're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be seeing everyone as a powerful. That's what you would, if you weren't racist, you would be seeing everyone as your equal or even more powerful than you. But what you do is you see them as people in need of your help.
Yes, and so ultimately people who are lesser than you because they're dependent.
Exactly.
And there's this brilliant stand-up comedian, I forgot his name, but he has a skit about this, and he says, "Oh, now we're not allowed to make jokes about these people. Why? Because they're beneath us."
But I mean, I don't know. Has that thing been going on for a long time? Like I remember, I don't know. I don't remember that being very prevalent when I was younger. That way of making of sort of like elevating your own position by caring about people less off than you. I always remember it being actually genuinely caring for people that were less off you, but it was probably wrong. I mean, like a good example would be something like, do you remember, were you around for Live Aid in the 1980s? Feed the world and all that stuff. I mean, regardless of whether any of the money actually made an impact,
that's
right?
A good question.
Were we being patronising then, do you think? Like,
I don't know. I mean, I was a kid when that was going down, so
I was as well. But so we probably had a more nuanced view of it, because when you're a kid, you just say, yeah, let's help people. Here, I have some money. Whereas when you're an adult, there might be more of an esoteric meaning behind your help,
Maybe. And there's also the term virtue signaling, where you kind of let everybody know that you're doing this, and you're like angry and loud about it. And as this stereotypical suburban white woman in America is protecting the helpless class that needs her protection, and you're virtue signaling to everybody. I'm doing this. So self-aggrandizing is spot on. I don't remember if it used to be like that.
It's just made me think maybe it's a function of the internet, because now you can actually signal it.
And you can put badges on your profile that you're supporting this and that cause.
You can actually signal it. I mean, think how hard it was to tell all your friends that you cared about Ukraine like 50 years ago.
Right.
You'd have to meet them all in person and do it. But now you can put a badge on Facebook and reach 700 people.
Yeah, right. And then there's also, the media and all the movements on social media to let us know which is the good side. And you have to, of course, be on the good side. And if you don't choose a side that's as bad as being on the bad side. So it is very polarizing. And whenever there is this sort of dynamic, this is the unconscious activism at play. It's just completely ego-driven. And you can convince yourself that you're doing the right thing, you're the good guy. But the ultimate motive is just to strengthen your own sense of self. And it's also, I would argue, very energetically expensive to engage in this kind of activity because, you're constantly in a state of warfare. You're always fighting the bad guy, and you see the world through the lens of this dynamic of the oppressor and the oppressed. For example, you can see, like I said, everything is kind of neutral. You can see an orphan child in the street, yes? And you can look at it like, this is an orphan, that's really sad. Or you can look at it like, look what the government has done. They're taking children from their parents and they're ruining us. And inflation, they're ruining the parents financially, child is orphaned. You can look at it as big pharma probably killed the parents. You can look at it through these lenses and you can walk around and see everything in the world through this. And then you're always in a state of warfare, in a state of actually low level of fear. And, in neurology, you would say that you're deciding everything from the sympathetic nervous system, which is it's basically your fight or flight mode. Again, very energetically expensive and ultimately extremely taxing to your whole physiology. So you're constantly stressing yourself out about this big bad thing that's out there to get all of us, and you have to fight it, as opposed to learning where it's all coming from. And I would argue it's all coming from your internal, unregulated self.
So, okay, let's say I agree with that. What are we supposed to do then? It almost feels like at that point you could just do nothing. It's like it's all me. No,
I mean, I think, again, the introspective is the first step. To look at to look at what am I projecting, how much of it is about me, and how much of it is actually about my genuine desire to make the world a better place without making it all about myself. And doing this inner work of, let's say, exploring your traumas, exploring your biases, exploring your narratives. And once you've done that, and you can look at the world more from the parasympathetic nervous system, just a calm, rational thinking where you're very well regulated and these things don't like spike your stress levels, then you'll be able to make much more informed decisions. And you can still engage in activism or, helping people and changing things for the better, but it will come from a place of calmness. Your decisions will be more effective, more impactful, more regulated.
You said a word there, genuine desire to help, right? How can you quantify that? How do you, I think people that feel a genuine desire to do something know what it is, but how do you I don't know, it's it's a very intangible thing really, because the truth is, there's two sides to desire, isn't there? Self-centered and non-self-centered, I suppose. And I know what I mean when if I see one of my daughters or son need help, the desire is there, and I know what it feels like. It even has a place in my body, right? But how do you explain that to someone who you think doesn't know that experience?
So you said, how do you quantify it? My answer would be, you don't quantify it. You feel it.
Yes.
And it goes down again to the body and feeling your somatic experiences. And if you're very divorced from your body, if you're very much in the head and do everything only rationally, logically, you will not even be familiar with the sensations. So it comes, again, part of the inner work is actually familiarizing yourself how your body feels. So one of the exercises that I think is very helpful is imagine you're walking into a house that is built perfectly for you. Every item in it you absolutely love, and it's handcrafted and is the most gorgeous house, and it's yours to live in. And think about how that feels in your body, like where that feeling sits, whether it's warm or cold, whether it's hard or soft. And then you can imagine the opposite. You're in a really, really stressful situation and feel anxiety, and you feel tightness, and you feel pressure in different parts of your body, and just see the two polarities. And then you can experiment with, let me run this alleged desire, by my body and check it and see what the response is of my body. Is there maybe tightness, stress? Is there comfort? Is there the totally soft flowing embrace of the body? And similarly, if there is a motivation, let's say your external calling, let's say something like, I want to fix the world by making everybody have Bitcoin, right? You're a Bitcoiner, so you'll relate to this. Now, you can tell if Bitcoin is your, let's say, genuine desire. If somebody attacks it, if somebody says Bitcoin is a scam, what does that do to your body? You're like, I generally don't care about this person's opinion because I know that Bitcoin is the best thing for humanity. Or am I personally attacked by this? All right? Does it spike my cortisol? Do I suddenly feel stressed because somebody is attacking it, and through that they're attacking me? My ego goes into self-defense mechanism. I would say that the informed, the conscious activism or your higher calling is if you absolutely don't care what anybody says. Because you're in your own truth, you're in your own genuine desire, and it does nothing to you, whatever they say.
That would be my position, right? But I think there's a dark side to that position as well, which I have also, which is basically a mechanism of indifference as a protection mechanism. Okay. I have that from my relationship with my brother, I think. There was conflict when we were kids, and he was bigger and older than me. And when I look back, I think my defense mechanism was indifference. You know what I mean? I taught myself it doesn't matter. But actually it did matter.
But it did matter.
Of course it matters. Yeah, no one likes being picked on by someone bigger than them. So there is so you have to be careful, because if someone picks on Bitcoin, of course I don't care. It's I try my hardest to convince them why it's a good idea, but if they're not, they literally are the ones losing out, according to me. But I have to be careful because...
Yeah, you have to be self-inquisitive. That's true. I can tell you, like, one of my recent things, yeah, like my shadow that I discovered. And actually not easy because it's very personal. But, as you know, I have 2 kids. From the second they were born, I knew I wanted to do attachment parenting, be with them every second, you know, do like breastfeeding for years and years, like wear them on my body, co-sleep with them and all that. And at the same time, when I was with my kids for a long time and I didn't have a lot of help, I mean, I had so much help from my husband, like unbelievable. But besides that, you know, it was always one of us with the kids. I would get like really ticked off, and I would have all these stories like, I want to do my work, my emails are waiting, I gotta, you know, unload the dishwasher, and it was always like kind of anger about these situations. And I realized there's a part of me that is resentful about this. There's a part of me that is resentful about having this little needy thing always attached to me. But of course, I had this image of myself as the perfect mother, and how could I ever admit that? Because I'm the perfect mom that's always there for her kids, and that's my highest calling in life. I love every second of it. I love every second of it, and never would I admit otherwise, because to admit is like a little death inside almost. But at some point, I was thinking, what is causing, you know, these really bad feelings? Yes, there's a part of me that fucking hates it, and that doesn't make me a bad mom. It's just there. And unless I accept it and admit this shadow to myself, I will always be projecting it onto these other situations that I'm trapped here. And so to admit this resentment to myself was like a huge step, you know, and just to accept that it's there and that it's okay.
Did you ever get to the bottom of it? Because I think I've noticed a similar thing in other women that I know. And I think it comes down to this, and this is a strong word, but I think the origin is kind of like disgust of weakness. You know what I mean? Like, disgust is a strong way to talk about it, but actually it's like a very subtle version of that. I don't know, this not liking weakness in other people. And it often manifests between women and men. Women hate it if they see a man. Like, you often hear women want men to open up, right? But in reality, in my experiences with a lot of women, when you do open up, actually, they don't like that, because they don't actually like to see what you would class. They don't feel safe. Yeah,
they don't feel safe with you.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be projected on your kids, who are the ultimate weak things in the world, literally. You know?
I don't think this was the case, although I do understand what you're saying, because it is true that it is triggering for women to see weakness in men, because you have this protector and suddenly he reveals his, you know, soft side, and ultimately makes you feel, I think, unsafe, especially if you're in a relationship that doesn't foster vulnerability, or in a family where vulnerability is not like a good trait. Yeah, where people are supposed to be like perfect and perform well all the time, then I think weakness can be really, really triggering. I mean, that's definitely an interesting one. I think with my kids, it was the feeling of feeling trapped, that I had no choice, which is truly, I think, at the core of a lot of dysfunction, is that where you lock yourself in a situation and you feel like you have no choice. But of course, that's an illusion, because we always have choice. The only thing you don't choose is like your death. Everything else you have choice about. That's why, you know, and I always thought I have to be with my kids, where this have to, that's always a red flag. Whenever you're in a situation and you feel like I have to be here, I have no choice, or I need to be here, that's a fallacy. I mean, you choose literally every single thing that you do in your life. You could even choose like not to breathe at this moment. It's fine.
You said you couldn't choose your own death. You can, of course, choose your own death.
I suppose, yes. I mean, you can't avoid it, as I guess. That's what I meant. That's the only thing.
It seems like that what you're talking about, and talking especially with regards to awareness of why you're doing things, where the origin of your urges, origin of your intentions, all this kind of stuff. And it seems like this connection with your body seems like the number one, the most important thing. And it's interesting because I agree with you here. And I learned this quite at a relatively young age, without realizing it, you know, really. I studied meditation in Indonesia with a guy for about a year and a half. I think, did we ever talk about this before?
No.
Right. He was a Buddhist, but he was also pretty out there. Back in Indonesia, you're allowed one of 5 religions on your kind of ID card. So you kind of have to be one of them. And he was, but he was very different to that. He was into a lot of other things, but he had formulated his own version of meditation, and he just called it B, with a B. And it was essentially a way of tricking you to get back in touch with your body. This is why I say I didn't really realize it until I'd gone through a year, 6 months of it. And I realized everything we're talking about in a way that it was like a self-discovery. No one told me, And the way that he did it was daily meditations of relaxing your body and using the process of relaxation as a feel. You actually go into the feelings of your body relaxing. And by doing that, you are letting go of your sort of logical attention and just residing in the feeling of your body. And then after sort of a few months of doing this, you kind of start, when you start realizing what's going on, he drops the big bomb, which is, now live your life like this, your daily life. Can you live your daily life with this same connection that you're kind of doing in meditation when it's nice and quiet and you're on your own? Can you stand in, the HMRC office talking to someone whilst still being in touch with your body? And I think, and that it's a really powerful methodology. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the solution to so many of our modern problems, because we live in a world that grabs our logical attention so dramatically. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, you get people that are just lost in their bodies, who are just ruled by these out of control emotions, and they're just as bad. And most people tend to reside at one or other end of the spectrum. Most people at the logical end, actually. I think most people are in their heads, aren't they? Yeah,
100%. That's the world we live in, and that's also, this level of consciousness is what created the world that we live in, with its many problems, certainly. So what I think with activism, we're not going to fix the world from the same level of consciousness that created the world. That's why elevating it, and I think having these somatic experiences and embodiment, it's the most important practice, and you can come at it from different angles, like your Indonesian teacher. There's also the spiritual teacher, Eckhart Tolle, that many people know is very influential. He has the present moment practice, where you just root it firmly in the presence, and that also requires you to turn off really the thinking mind, because that's the only way that you can really perceive with all your senses just what is around you. And he says, because we live in this world, it's always a dance. You are always a little bit in the mind and a little bit in the body. And incidentally, that's also the symbol of Christianity. Symbolically, the cross, it is the horizontal dimension, which is the time dimension that we live in, the dimension of things and objects in time. And then there is the vertical that cuts through it, which is sort of the timeless. So the one that does not require any thinking. It's just the spear of presence. And when you think about it, 99% of your problems are only in your mind. So certainly stepping out of the mind and into the body eliminates that 99% already, because we're constantly, the mind is so compulsive and it has such a momentum that it is quite difficult to turn it off. And when people say, you just have to meditate, I find meditation quite a radical practice for somebody who has never done it before and who has been in their mind and on their to-do list, constant thing their whole life. It is extremely uncomfortable and difficult to even try and meditate for 2 minutes. It is almost impossible. That's why I would recommend very, very small practices in the beginning. Just like, for example, if you take a sip of water, really take that sip and really feel it again with your senses, somatically, what's happening, and that may maybe take 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Just do this it's like a micro meditation. It really is, because you're very, very focused on what's happening, and you turn up the mind, and then you can expand it to actual meditation practice. But to go to meditation right away from somebody who's heavily mind-based, it's like that would be a master class. Well, it's very hard.
The problem with meditation is you don't know what it is. You don't know what meditation is. When someone says meditation, you don't know what it is. And actually, if you do meditation, you realize it isn't anything, actually. you know. And the trick, well, I think it's really actually quite a bad idea to talk about meditation, because then you associate it with the mind immediately. Like, what is it? And then when someone says, oh, you know, well, meditate, you know, be still, be quiet with yourself. It's like, well, what does that mean?
Or still your mind.
Exactly,
Quiet your mind.
right. Which are all massive red flags, because they're all coming from the mind. They're all instructions from the mind, which is the opposite.
It feels like it's something that you have to achieve, but it's not an achievement, or it's not something to do.
The best, well, the way my teacher used to explain it was, he said, look, the best we can do is let go. And these two words, let go, there was always a moment of that in our meditation, which began in the body. But there is no way to instruct your mind to stop. It's a fallacy. You can't do it. That's the whole point. It's very, you know, the only thing you can do is to let go. But you need to know what it is you're letting go of and what you are. And they come from experience. So it's I find that whole, I do meditation, or you should do meditation. It's like, it's a really stupid way.
Here's another one that I like. It's also just get curious about what goes on in your mind and almost be an observer of the thoughts that come. Like, you can ask yourself the question, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. And then you observe it as it comes. And what that does, it creates a separation between your mind and yourself. And you realize that you're not your mind. Often the thoughts that come in, you didn't even put them there. They just sort of show up. And if you can just sit back and observe and not judge them, the thought can be like, I'm really cold. I can't wait to get out of here. Who is this asshole talking to me? You know, and you just, without judgment, just like look at the thought. Because most of the time we're completely identified with the thought. You think 100% you are what you're thinking, but you're not. You're the entity that's where the thoughts emerge, and you can observe them.
I think another thing with meditation, which it was very helpful to me, because a lot of people never really, when they talk about meditation, it's just some cure-all for everything. But most people who don't know what it is, who might need that experience, people that tell them about it aren't very good teachers. And the best, like simple things like this, right? If you follow a meditative practice where you try and reside in your body more, and even the word try is the wrong thing here, like allow yourself to reside in your body, right? What will happen over a 10-minute meditation is 15,000 times you will realize, I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm thinking, oh shit, I'm thinking, you know. And it could go on for weeks and months, and even like we would like sort of pinch ourselves to give yourself a reference point. Look, that feeling there, when you pinch yourself, it doesn't start in your mind. The feeling is in this part of your body. Before you've analysed it, before you've said, oh, I'm pinching myself, the feeling comes first. And if you can train yourself to at least acknowledge that, and it doesn't come quick, especially if you spent most of your life in your head, which is what most people do. And
if you spent a lot of your life also suppressing, your sensations in your body. To bring it back to children yet again, I was saying about the temper tantrum, which is actually, it's like a somatic sequence when the child has the desire to throw themselves on the ground and kick their feet in anger. That behavior is not the problem. That's always their release. There was some sort of stress stimulus and they're releasing it. And if we don't let them complete this, again, and we say to them, you're fine, stop it, and look what everybody else is going to think about you when you're doing this, you're taking them out of the body and into their mind. So you're teaching them to do exactly this pathological thing, ultimately, where they're perfectly self-regulated. This behavior that they're displaying, it may be socially unacceptable, who cares? It is a regulation mechanism. And once that is completed, they will be perfectly fine, no residual stress, no trauma left, they'll get up and go play. But if we don't let them complete it, and we force them to switch into their mind, that is the learned behavior that they will then display for the rest of their lives. And they will have to, when they're 40 and they're having some immunological problems, whatever, they will have to relearn again what they were born with, this regulation mechanism that is built into every system. I have a dog, and I know when something stressful happens to him, he shakes violently, right? Shakes it off, and he's good to go. And as humans, And as humans, I wish we all knew how to do that still.
Well, the other thing, of course, is you can take it too far. I mean, the logical decision-making process is also super important. And I had that, like I say, last night with one of my daughters. She phoned me and she said, Dad, I need help making a decision. She wants some new riding boots because she's got a competition at the weekend. But riding boots are £300 for and she's 12 or whatever, and I won't buy them for her. She has her own money. She has to buy. And
from the eggs, right?
No, this is a different one.
That's the other daughter.
This is Alice, my eldest daughter. She doesn't have a business actually, as a result. But they get money. Actually, she started cleaning the house for money actually, because Liz is working now and stuff. Anyway, but the point is, it was up to her. But she wanted to know. She was looking for validation. You could tell. She came on the phone last night, and I said, okay, well, let's think about this, right? You've got the new boots you actually want. They're 300 quid. There's 80 quid ones that you can get at the local riding tack shop, but they don't really rock your boat. You want the Ariat ones, the 300 quid ones. You don't want those ones. I get that. I love a good boot. Like my shoes are, I buy a 600 quid pair of shoes and have
stylish.
And have my jeans were worth nothing, but something about quality leather shoes, I really, really, really love them. So I get it. But in her case, I said, look, here's how I would play this. This is not a gut feeling. This is pure logic. Get on Facebook Marketplace. Get on eBay. Find a second-hand pair of the best quality ones you can, because they're good quality. People look after them. Think about this. You look after your boots, right? Every time you've been riding, you put dubbing on them. You wipe them down. You do all this kind of stuff. And at that point, you're probably paying a little bit more than for the new bad ones. But when you grow out of them in a year, the time is come to sell them, you probably get roughly the same money for them, and this is the correct way to think about that. It's not like, I just want the best ones, which is which is kind of like the desire, that the emotional response is, the best ones, and there's all wrapped up in that is, I want to show off to the other girls. I want them to feel like I'm worthy of these amazing boots. I'm all this kind of stuff. But there is a really simple way to play that. As an 11-year-old girl who's only got 150 quid to her name, so she's going to have to work her ass off for cleaning the house if she really wants to buy these new boots and stuff. So I think teaching your kids about rational decision making is super important as well. It's just making sure they understand the difference between someone else's thoughts and your own thoughts. Because obviously in that case, I've been buying and selling things for years, especially good quality things, because I always buy, I think, there's a fallacy in buying low quality things. They're cheaper, but actually, even on paper, when you look at them, like, my boots I'll never actually get rid of them. All right, they cost a lot of money, but in 20 years when I resold them for like 100 quid, how much did I pay per year for them or whatever?
Right.
It's like,
it's like the saying, we're not rich enough to buy cheap things.
Right. Yes.
So it says it all. But a couple of things about what you said about your daughter. First of all, it's a testament to your relationship with her that she calls you for advice, which is fantastic.
I think it was more like validation. She wanted to. I think she probably.
She cares.
She'd probably been speaking to her mum. This is a guess, because they were all at home, and I think probably Liz would have been saying, "Look, just get because there's an easy option there. The difficult option is finding a second-hand pair that's your size." Talking to the person, getting them sent, it's not easy buying. It's easy to walk into a shop and buy a pair of. You drive to the shop and go and buy them, but they're not really what you want. I know it. I knew it. I knew that's what she was on the phone for. And my job at that moment is to offer both sides of the story, so that it reminds her, and then say, but what do you really want? I had this conversation. I didn't even tell you this, right? Earlier on this week. Someone who was like Mikkel Thorup, he dropped out of the pod because his flight was cancelled from Turkey or whatever. And I put a message on the group chat and said, "Does anyone of all the speakers at the conference, said anyone free?" And a guy called Alex.
Yeah, I know Alex Martinov.
Yeah, Alex Martinov. He said, "Yeah, I'm free."
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about him. I said, "Come on down." He came 15 minutes later, who was sat opposite me, and I basically had a 1.5-hour therapy session with him. And he was brilliant.
Yeah, he's great.
He was really good, because basically what he said to me, and everyone needs reminding this, and I think that's why I was doing this with my daughter, is like, what do you really want? Not what you think you can get, not what you've decided is probably what you'll get or what you think you want. What do you really want? Because he was asking, we were talking about my career, and I was saying, look, I've got this long and illustrious career in an industry that I don't have any interest in anymore. I love this world we're in. Liberty, freedom, free cities, Bitcoin, all this stuff. This is where everything is fun and exciting and world life-changing and world-changing. But it's not an easy place to work when you come from the world I come from. And and I was saying, here's my predicament, like I have a set of skills that don't really transfer into this world. They do actually, but not in a way that the average employer would recognize. You try and get a job at a Bitcoin company as a creative, there aren't many roles. If you're a kind of a coder or a CFO or all these kind of jobs, which sure you might be able to. Not coding, but a lot of the managerial jobs, they may be quite intuitive because if you've been running your own business for years, but on paper you have no experience in these things. Anyway, so I was telling him all this, saying, look, and he said to me, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, and he said, no, what do you really want to do? Take away all these things about what you think you could achieve or what's available or what would you, and the truth is I would love to scale this podcast up to a level where I just did this. This is my dream job now, And I said that. And as a result, over the next few days, once I realized how I was holding myself back in my thought process, because it's true. If in an ideal world, I would generate enough money from this podcast to live off, and I would just travel the world having conversations like this and all these other things, But as a result now, my strategy has completely changed, and I can't really explain how, because it's not publicly applicable, but we kind of talked about it offline a little bit. But it worked. It absolutely worked. I had been holding a limiting factor in my mind very subtly for a very long time. And the truth was, it took an outsider to just say a simple word like, strip away all the crap, strip away all your expectations, go on just a little mental journey. What do you really want? Because, and I think I've heard Jordan Peterson say this, he said, whatever you want, you can probably get in 5 years. If you put your mind to it. Doesn't matter what it is, but you have to know what you want first, because
that's the thing, yeah. Unless you know, and I think again, it is something that you feel in your body. That's like the gut feeling. If it is such a strong desire, like desire for something almost life changing, yeah, the mind plays a role in it. But ultimately, we're intelligent people. We can argue for or against a case very easily. You could build a case against it in 10 minutes and make it so convincing. Or on the other side, yes. But how do you know what is true? If it sits right in your gut. But if you're unfamiliar with what feels good in your body, and you clearly are, but I think that most people actually aren't because they don't follow the signs of their body at all, then they will not be able to make these gut decisions. They will make everything mind-driven. And the mind can make a case for anything, and especially if it's based on, like you said, limiting beliefs, which we all have. If they remain forever unexplored, they will forever feel like this is the truth, and they will dictate what you do.
Well, I mean, in my case here, the limiting belief is it's very difficult to achieve what I want to achieve. But that's not the point. No, but it is. It is. Like we're in a sort of minority industry here. It's not, and we have a great following of people that listen to this podcast. But it's not hundreds of thousands of people. There aren't, like you can't. The conference only brings in 350 people.
Which is a lot. I mean, they come here to Prague, like they make the trip. I mean, it's the tip of the iceberg of the followers, right? That actually make the highest commitment that there is to come here physically.
But I like to compare them to Bitcoin podcasts because they're in a similar, the Bitcoin conference gets 50,000 people, so now that's that's like a factor of 100. What is it? 300? No, a factor of 10, a bit more. So that's a lot. That's a 10x, 12x, 13x, whatever. That's a lot. So you'll never, as someone, if you're trying to reach out to this industry, which is it's a growing industry, we see that every year. The conference gets bigger every year. More people listen to the podcast. But to be realistic and to say, look, you could turn this into something that generates like $100,000 a year and you live a beautiful life and you can travel the world and stuff is a very tall order. However, you still have to think it. You still have to think, that's actually what I really want. And what has happened to me prior to that is I've had those thoughts and I've gone, yeah, don't waste your time, mate. Mm-hmm. But that's wrong, actually. I never acknowledged that I was doing that. That actually, no, be honest with yourself. You do actually want that. And as a result, my life has changed in 3 days, literally, since I had that conversation. It didn't take long. I was mulling things over. I was thinking that. And all of a sudden, within 2 days, I've come up with this plan to do something quite radical that I would never have had but for those few words.
There literally. You go. And sometimes I think this like external, it's called almost like I would call it like a permission slip, like from the outside world comes in and now you have the permission and now you can do it. And then you'll connect all the other dots. That's fine. But taking that like leap and making that decision, I mean, that's really like the cardinal step in that. So I'm happy that happened for you. That's beautiful because I have no doubt, you'll obviously knock it out of the ballpark. You already do. But going back to your daughter, what I was also going to say, because again, like children, I just love that topic. She's 11 years old and she was making a decision, which is a lot of adults would not be able to, I think, even decide this, the way that you helped her decide. It's like a brilliant solution to her problem with the riding boots. A factor in it is also the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for our logical thinking and for our regulation. You know at what age it matures when it is completed?
No.
25.
Is it?
25.
Oh,
it is
shit.
so late in life. But when I think back to my life and I talk to a lot of people about this, they're like, you know what, my early 20s, I was still making like really just asinine decisions. Like you do like dangerous decisions and crazy stuff that doesn't make sense. It's like, yeah, you can really actually consider yourself an adult neurologically around 25. So for an 11-year-old, this can really be quite an overwhelming decision. And there's a lot of factors. And so it's super impressive that you guys worked through it. And there's a limit to what we can expect of children, even of teenagers in these scenarios. There's also something to be said for, of course, letting children fail, make wrong decisions, because nothing is as instructive as the lived experience. Nothing is, the mistake or failure is the best teacher. I mean, we can all attest to that.
True. And talking of that, I don't know whether maybe my phone knew we were going to have a conversation today, because last night I was doing a bit of doom scrolling and I was getting lots of kind of, those Instagram stories that are all about, like spiritual or like, and I did see one that was related to exactly what you're saying there, which was, it was a son coming to his father. It was one of those reels where it's got, it's just an inspirational reel or whatever. So the son was coming to his father it was a real life experience, and to tell him about his failure, something he'd failed. And the woman said, this response was so perfect. The first thing the dad said to the son was, thank you for bringing this to me, and, things like that are the kind of parenting skills that are not a lot of people understand, that they would often just cover up their child's not unsuccess. Whereas the father in this particular reel decided to use it as a way, look, thanks for admitting this part of yourself to me, because those parts, the dark, these failures, these parts of ourselves, when we share them with someone, that's a really bold move, you know,
it's vulnerability.
Yeah. And I love stuff like that. I think, you know, but it takes a considered response. You know, like you say, a lot of people would just say, "Oh well, give them a ice lolly, have an ice lolly."
Yeah, right.
Literally.
Or say, "Oh, it's not that bad. It's all right." Or jump in with advice, often, which is maybe like the male response, like I'm coming in to fix the situation for you. But oftentimes not what people want, and I think vulnerability is the best vehicle for connection between people because it takes courage, right? Because you could get a bad response or be criticized. You know, there could be shadow shaming, like you said, when you open up maybe vulnerably and it's met with shame response. So it is scary because you bear a part of yourself where you admit, you know, I'm not perfect. And when you have a person where you can, who responds to that, who just accepts it without judgment, and they basically let you know, not in these words, but basically the response is, I love you anyway, right? You're worthy of love,
but
regardless of your mistakes.
In this case, and I think this is an acutely male problem because male success is a deeply ingrained part of our psyches. It's how we operate. It's how the hierarchy of males works. Success is a huge component of it. But with a father to a son, the son is going to fail on so many levels. And it's important to reinforce, I think, that by revealing that to this mentor, you're showing a sign of strength, you know, and just leave it at that. None of the other stuff matters. That whatever the failure was, it's not that important at that moment. You know, it might be something you could address with your mind later, but the actual experience there was a son sharing their darkest moment with another man. Which, you know, like there's a lot of mystery around that, especially amongst women, men sharing their feelings with each other and all this kind of stuff. And it's a very misunderstood place. We have lots of ways of sharing our feelings with each other, which seem on the face of it, seem completely insane. Like basically, like in the UK at least, we basically scold each other. Yeah. We take the mickey out of each other. And the harder you can do it, the ruder you can be to a man, the closer your relationship. Yeah, exactly. Because it shows you that exact thing. And women have real hard times. They do struggle with that, especially when women enter male spaces. It's like, bloody hell, this is rough and ready. Everyone's being really... And it's really, I think sometimes women try and calm that side down, which is a terrible idea because it's just, it's how we operate. And it's, you know.
I think it's also cultural. I mean, it's very, very typically British. I mean, my husband's American and he has like slightly different dynamic with his friends where there is also that level of like busting each other's balls. It's important for sure. But it's not necessarily the same dynamic. But I do agree with you that there is something that men can give each other that women just cannot replace. And it's almost like as a man, with your problems, you go to another man. You don't really come to your wife. And the wife, her role is really to be your cheerleader, not your coach. I don't want to tell my husband what to do or how he should act. I mean, I will always tell him, you know best, and whatever you do is perfect. And I believe in you 1,000%. And whichever words are right in that moment, basically, is the sentiment I want to convey. But then for the actual solutions, I feel like it's best if we discuss this with other men.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. I've made big mistakes in my life by confiding in a woman to find the answer, actually. Especially
your woman, because, you know, it could be another woman, she could be like a business consultant, whatever. Then I think it's different than your woman, than your wife. That's not her role. Her role is to give you the wind under your wings in the sense that she knows you got this.
Well, I mean, and also, you know, it's a bit of a meme these days, but that there's some phenomenal advice that sort of rolls around the internet every now and then, which is, you know, don't take advice from anyone that isn't doing what you're trying to do or achieve. and men and women are very, very different. So the way we operate is very, very different. And I would argue that it's very difficult for a woman to have the same goal as a man, really, honestly, truly, with the same methodology and the same, Anyway, actually, it's just, it is the truth. And, because really when you find powerful women that maybe are an inspiration to you as a man, they're often very masculine.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, well, you don't really need that opinion then. You may as well get it from a man, Whereas, the real inspirational women for men are completely different. They're not on a competitive level with men. It's like something completely different. It's like calming, like serene.
Yes, exactly. I think that's historically always been the role of women, as maybe being the spirit guide more for a man, to guide with her intuition and with her presence, and also to inspire a man. Because why do you do all the stuff that you do? I mean, you do it for your woman ultimately, and for the family that she gives you. So it's a polarity that is sacred. And when it works well, they can be the most fulfilling dynamic of your life. I mean, that's why you do everything. So she will not give you business advice, but, I think it's fine to come to your woman kind of for her intuition, like what feels right to you, what do you need, what do you need for you to feel safe, what can I give you, kind of take direction from her in that sense. And also like for the physical touch, the replenishment, I don't just mean sex, but just like the intimacy, the closeness. That's something obviously you don't get from other men. Although like patting each other on the back, it's also physical. It's also nice. It's also nice to have that from other men, and like the firm handshake,
That is, it's very intimate.
It is. And it's important. And
it's a phenomenal experience, a group of men getting together.
And they do have men's groups now. I think it's becoming like more prevalent, where men come and they just exchange their experiences, which are unique, which women cannot fully understand.
Do you know what though? I don't agree with all those men's groups, because a lot of them they're not what we're talking about, let's say. They are a form of intimacy which is much more similar to male to female intimacy, and I don't think it's necessarily important. I know that you can get into that as a guy. It's not my thing though. I would rather stand shoulder to shoulder with men. You know what I mean?
But I think there's also like groups like that. I mean, there's all sorts. But I think it's like a group of your peers, men that you can respect, that are on a similar path in your life, and they will give you insight that women cannot give you, just like you said, because women can give you something else. Yeah. So we really need each other.
For sure, 100%. And I was thinking of something else then. I've lost my train of thought. Let's go back to it did take a long time to get through the shadow side of saving the world.
I feel like there's more, but I
think
we covered.
No, keep going then. What more is there to the shadow side of saving the world?
I think that the main message is just do the inner work so you can change the world from a healthy place and not from a toxic place. There's something that I noticed at the conference this week. There's some of the verbiage that's being used around freedom as if it's a concept to be fought over, to wage war over. They're going to rip it away from us. We have to grab it. We have to hold on to it, and we have to fight for our freedom. And that to me is the language of warfare. That is the language that created the world that we live in, and it's not going to necessarily make it better. I don't think that freedom is something that anybody can take from you ultimately, because you always have the freedom to choose your attitude and to choose your response to circumstances. That's why the element of choice is, I think, core to realize in your life. And I had another person, I had such a fascinating conversation with them at the conference, and he or she said that if we want to win in this fight, in this world, again, perceiving it as like a battleground, then we have to be the ones who scare people the most, because people are motivated by fear. So they will only like get on board with these free cities and move to intentional communities, libertarian communities, if they're really scared of the alternative. And I was thinking, wow, so whoever scares the people the most like wins,
I wouldn't call us a scary bunch, that's for sure. How many scary people do you meet at the
Well, I
conference?
think what this person was saying, that they have to be so scared of the alternative,
Yes.
that, and their point was that scaring people works. It's true. It's effective. I mean, it's very effective. But it's only effective up to the point until somebody comes around with another even scarier story, and then they will follow them. You know. So
I'd argue that's a tactic of the people we are trying to ignore.
That's right.
The existential threat thing. It's amazing. Like, they've done it again. You know, the kind of climate change is the existential threat now, right? And it's, you know, someone shared a link to the video, Climate the Movie. You've obviously seen that. Climate the Movie?
No.
Oh, watch it. It's phenomenal. It's a very, very, very good movie about just basically debunking everything about the climate emergency in a very considered way. It's not it's not like Zeitgeist or anything like that. It even sounds like it's a BBC doc. It's got, you know, a lot of very Nobel-winning people in it. And Climate the Movie. You've got to watch it. It's phenomenal. The point is that there are, you know, if you can do the climate change thing, or you can do the non-climate change thing. They're both. There's people from both sides saying X, Y, Z. You know. The point is, it's an existential threat, and the Cold War was an existential threat. The virus was an existential threat. You know, they're doing it again, and it's, you know, I used to think that, you know, the Cold War one, I used to wonder why people were scared of that. It seems like a strange threat, you know, communism, you know, coming to our country and stuff. But when you see the climate change one, you realize how powerful it is. And in the film, actually, they show all the ways that this threat is being pushed on you, you know, and it's especially a few of them when you look back now in hindsight. It's really, I remember, like, there's a section about a little section about Greta Thunberg, and you remember her speech at the UN, how dare you, and all this stuff. I remember at the time looking at it and going, that's a bit weird. Have you ever watched it back now?
No.
Oh my God, it's outrageous, really. It's so weird and bizarre and disturbing that this young girl is, how dare you do this? You know, all the things we were talking about in this first section, this coming to save the world, projecting, all this stuff, it's all there, and it's coming from a young girl who is, you know, you know.
Yeah, I hope she's okay, honestly. I mean, I think that, I wonder how she's going to look back at these things. But
she's doing the activism thing now with, like, I saw her on a kind of Israel-Palestinian march. I think she's on the Palestinian side.
Right. But what is the pitfall of this is that, you know, you can be terrified of climate change, or you can be terrified of the measures that come to stop the climate change. So you can be on the other side, and you can be equally as terrified, but it's still fear-based behavior. And you could think, or a person could think, I see through all this propaganda, I see through the bullshit, and I'm terrified because they are going to try and blot out the sun to save us from this quote-unquote climate change. So you are still living in fear. And if that's what drives your activism, if that is what motivates you, that you're actually terrified, that you're in fight or flight mode, low-key, you're not going to have a meaningful impact, because you're making your decisions from just like survival mode. You're not making it from this higher place of intuitive, gut feeling, optimal energy, calmness, and from the belief, I will always have a choice. Everything's going to be okay, silver lining, not sort of like illusion, you know, kidding yourself or something, but thinking maybe things will not turn out okay. But I think I'll make the best out of it in any situation. And I still have agency. I'm responsible for my situation, for my state of mind in any situation. And I will go back to, I think I referenced him last time, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He's, you know, obviously an Auschwitz survivor, and there are others. Edith Eger also wrote amazing books about Auschwitz, and how it boils down to choosing your response to any situation. And that is true freedom. That's the one thing that you never have to fight over, and nobody will take it from you, ever.
The way I see that manifesting in the Free Cities movement is in the sense that people like us view free cities as a benefit to everyone. And we're not thinking about, yes, I agree, the government are getting authoritarian and this and blah and that. But I'm building something. It's like if I'm building my house, I'm just building my house. I'm not thinking about the oppressiveness of the government. I'm building something. And obviously in our case, it's like it's available for people to opt into. It's perfect. There needs to be no fear-based component to it at all. All it is building something for the good of everyone. I mean, you could, I suppose, decide that you're doing it to, escape the government. You're building some house in the middle of Panama or something. I don't know, but that's not actually the case. People are often these people are market driven as well. They realise that the market is
it's a business decision.
Is important, yeah, but it's both. I mean, I think Massimo Mazzoni is a good example of this with Morazan. He loves Morazan. He loves Honduras. He loves the people. He wants people to live in his place. He's gutted about all this stuff that's going on. But then he also said to me once on a podcast, he said, "Yeah, but you can make money out of poor people as well." I said, "Don't get me wrong here. This is a business as well." But I'm not primarily just doing this to make money.
Just profit driven.
No, it's not. It's not. It will make a profit, but it's a win-win. Everyone wins. You get a better standard of living, you get safety. I make a bit of money, and I feel like I'm doing a good in the world, and
Yeah, and it's and it's not fear-based, and there is no like enemy to defeat or something to struggle for. It's actually a creative endeavor. And that has a completely different energetic charge than this tug of, for positions. It's a win-win, like you said.
Yeah, okay. Are we done? Do you think we're done with Shadow Side?
You were done with
Okay. This one, I'm interested to hear your perspective on, because I don't think we've ever talked about money. How we think and feel about money and what it says about us.
Yeah, so the way I look at money, it is a form of energy. And in our present world, it is something like it's a permission slip, right, to all sorts of experiences, to life, essentially. So how we think about this almost primary energy, I think, really says a lot about us. I think one that maybe one-ups it in what is like gets to the core of us is sexuality. But I won't go there. It's like a massive topic, but money is close to that, honestly, because it's an energetic exchange between people. And I think there's two primary positions that you have in life, kind of like your default maybe factory setting, and it can be the setting of abundance or a setting of scarcity. And it resonates very well, if I guess, because it's all connected, what we're talking about with activism, if it's fear-based, yes. Yeah. Or abundance, kind of like freely flowing energy, or love, that kind of vibration, if you're operating from that. And I think your life will be dramatically different whether you're operating from the energy of abundance or scarcity.
Now, I agree with you, but I have found it very difficult sometimes to click into abundance in inverted commas. Give us some strategies, some real life strategies, because I agree, if your mindset is abundance, it does manifest in front of you. But once again, like meditation, it's not one of those things where you can go, I'm going to have abundance, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, because you could be lying to yourself. You could be just saying those words. But we say in life you don't get what you want, you get what you believe. So what you really fundamentally believe, that's the reality that will manifest, and not necessarily even on the spiritual level, because if you're operating from abundance, you believe that things are flowing freely to you, will be more open to opportunities, and you will recognize opportunities around you more that are beneficial for you. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that's not a made-up thing, it's real, right? Because you're creating this cognitive bias of, I am a money magnet and there's business opportunities all around me, then you're more likely to see them when they actually are there. Whereas if you're shrinking in the corner and you're thinking the world is here to get you and to take things away from you, then you will actually be blind to the opportunities when they present themselves. So I call this the capacity for abundance, which you can, I think, cultivate, and you can also expand it. And a really great place to start is to realize that you are already abundant. There is abundance in you because you're a living being. So you're actually already resonating with abundance, with the colors that you see around you, the sensations that you can feel on your skin, the smells that you can intake, and kind of appreciate, which is a gratitude practice. That's a very powerful practice, to appreciate what you have already and not tie it so much into the monetary things, but also recognize, yes, that's a part of it. And to say, I am deserving of money, I want money, and I already have so much. So that is how you start inviting the abundance, by recognizing that it's already there. Because it is. Even if you're in a hospital bed, there is an abundance of sensations that you can experience. And rejoicing in those, that will completely change also your energetic brain from a person who is in misery and sees themselves as incompetent, as a victim, in this scarcity mindset. Shrinking yourself. So that's one. That's something that you can instantly do. For example, you can go make a coffee and just say, how amazing. This thing that so many people worked on, when you think about the whole supply chain of a coffee bean, and it made its way to you, and I was able to purchase it with money that I made. It doesn't have to be luxury coffees, any kind of coffee. And I can now drink it and sense it. What luxury, what glorious riches are coming to me now, and celebrate that in your mind.
The truth is, though, when we talk about abundance, I think most people are like money, or at least, like in my case now, I want a new career. I want abundance, but I do want a wage. I want money.
Yeah.
I do want that. I think, and then when you get into that realm, then you start getting gurus sitting cross-legged going, I don't know, oming for bloody possessions and all this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? That's the connection I make anyway. So genuinely, if you know someone, and I know probably hundreds of people like this, if I just took the time to ask, even in our movement, there are people who want to make a change but feel like they don't have the resources, or people sitting in the crowd at the conference looking up at somebody who's starting a free city. And you're like, I want to be part of that, but I'm not. That guy doesn't need me. He doesn't need a new employee. He doesn't need, So how do these people find abundance? Because, and by abundance, I think I'm meaning the resources to achieve the things their goals.
Well, I feel like, first of all, if you feel like what you have right now, and everybody who's listening to this podcast is a rich person, yes? I mean, we are really talking about the top 10% of humanity. I mean, that's the reality. So if you don't see yourself as having now, then if you make $10 more million, you're not going to see yourself as having then. It's still not going to be enough. It has to come from a point of appreciating what you have now. And what you have is, for the larger part of humanity, is riches beyond their wildest dreams. If you have a phone, if you're sitting here and you have unlimited amounts of food, we're all fucking rich, okay? So so start with that. Yeah. And then you can kind of expand this capacity for having by saying okay, I have, enough, and then I would like to have more, and both can coexist. Those are not contradictory statements. It's having and wanting more can both sit next to each other, and say to yourself also I'm worthy of having more. And even though we are all able to say it, maybe you don't totally believe it, because maybe you were taught, there's all these sayings money comes from hard work, and only people who are deserving, they get money, and you get what you deserve, and all these things that money comes with some sort of set of conditions that you have to fulfill. So you may actually believe that you may actually see yourself as a poor person your whole life, if that's the mindset that you grew up in. Maybe it was a family that struggled with not having enough, and then that's something that you have to overcome if you want to have the capacity to have more.
I feel like we're back in the realm of meditation. It's you need to get into this abundant way of life. I'm missing some really practical steps. Are you literally saying if you get up every morning and look in the mirror and saying abundance will come to your life.
It's not what I'm saying at all. It's not what I'm saying. It's I'm realizing the fact, which is the truth, undeniable, that you are rich already.
Okay, all right.
If you don't view yourself as a rich person now, if you feel yourself as poor or limited by your financial resources, then that's what you will always be. But it's not true. You have to. I would explore this narrative for what it is and say, I am one of the richest people on this planet right now, and in the history of humanity, which is, let's say, since the cognitive revolution, 70,000 years, I'm one of the richest people to ever have existed, and that's a fact. Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree, but I have a plan for a project that requires abundance, and the abundance is not there.
Then you have
example,
a perfectly working mind, and you can achieve, just like Jordan Peterson says when you quoted earlier, within 5 years you can achieve it if you believe that it's possible. But start with the fact is how rich you already are. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable. And again, if you don't have a capacity to appreciate and see that right now, then you're not even going to see it when you're going to be a millionaire. You're always going to be saying, oh, but what is the next shiny object on the horizon that I want and I can't afford it? It is really a mindset.
The truth is, though, in my case, it ebbs and flows. There are, like, when you're winning and you're on a wave, you feel abundance. But there are troughs to these peaks where you don't feel that abundance is around. So you're saying it's still around, right? It's still
100%
there.
It's around. 100% it's around. Even if you were like borderline poverty level in the UK, then you're still a rich person. I mean, it's almost like impossible in the Western world for to conceive that you would go hungry or something like that. That's not an experience that any of us will have in our lifetime, certainly that are, in part of this conversation right now.
But is it important to compare ourselves to the historical version of ourselves 20,000 years ago? I mean, we don't, do we? Well, I look around and I see people who are achieving what I want to achieve.
Yeah, but it's a perspective that I think is helpful, again, to put it into perspective, where we are right now, because it is, if you're only going to focus on what you want and you can't have, then that's all you're going to see. You're going to see the unfulfilled desire and where you're lacking, and you're going to see the scarcity. But you can flip it around. You can look at what you already have with, your mind on, yes, and from this abundance that I have, I want to build it up. I want to expand my empire. I have goals for the future. But it's extremely unhelpful to focus only on that and seeing yourself as the person who is not having. And there's more to how we think about money. A lot of the times we think about money, even the terminology that we use about money is like spending money or even wasting money on something. Maybe you would feel like your daughter would waste her money on those expensive boots if she bought the new ones. But I like to reframe it because I like to play with words a lot, and you can reframe it into, I'm recirculating the money. I'm sending the money to do good somewhere else for somebody else, and to make it even to a playful, kind of joyful exercise. Even the act of paying bills, if we feel that it's something that we have to do, something where we're almost held prisoner, we have no choice, and I have to part with this hard-earned money, it becomes an act of lessening ourselves, because you have to give away this part of it that you want to hold on to. What if you just say, I get to pay bills. I have this luxury. I made this money. Now I'm sending it on, even if it's to the IRS, even if it's to an institution that you hate its existence. Yeah, yes, which is another one too, interesting to explore, because that's also a bit of victim consciousness there, because you feel like you have no choice, which is not true. I mean, we have a choice. You don't have to pay taxes. You can figure out other ways to do it, but you can. How differently does it feel to, I have to pay these fucking taxes, and I have to this is my money, and I have to give it away to these mooches and to these bureaucrats, or to saying, I get to pay taxes because this is my choice, and I'm recirculating the money. Maybe it will do some good down the road, and I'm going to enjoy this act. Something
I've experienced through the different stages in my life is when I was younger and free and a single guy.
Free, huh?
Well, in the sense I'm going to tell you now, you know what I mean. I never thought about money. I thought about what I wanted to do, and money was always a side effect of it. And as a result, I earned loads of money. Like in my younger years, I was flush with cash because it was just me, and I feel like I had the luxury to think like that, which was I pursued creative endeavors, and the money just kept rolling in, and it was almost like the more I didn't care how much I was getting paid, the more I was getting paid.
So that totally confirms what I'm saying. It's the energy that you come at it from.
Right. But in later life, once I now I'm not just me. I'm 5 people. Yeah. And sometimes people working for you and all this kind of stuff. And I've found tuning into that same energy or way of being much harder because, and you know, if every decision I make has a concrete, effect on 3-4 other people, in really does. They can't spend as much money. If I stop earning money, they can't spend as much. And I do struggle with that same sense because, like, the me of when I was younger in this situation now would be being quite reckless and would achieve through recklessness. You know what I mean? Like, I have been quite reckless, but it took a long time. But it's taken a long time to get myself to that situation where I felt like I was going to do it. It was the last resort. Prior to that, I was trying to create a safety net. Yeah. But it's not as good, and it's much harder to tune into abundance when you do it that way.
So I'm going to tie this into the narratives that we tell ourselves, and what I'm hearing, it's a very powerful narrative of the provider father, and it even can go like stronger to the narrative of like the father that's like bled dry by the family, and he sacrifices everything to provide for the family. And I think narratives can have a really powerful hold on us. And you almost like don't want to interrupt the narrative. You can cast yourself in a role and not want to step out of it. It's like you don't want to interrupt watching a good movie. You want to like see where the narrative goes. And my sense is that there is this role of the father, provider, and there's a sense of like heaviness in it, like a burden. The obligation like lies heavy.
I quite like it being a provider. I suppose the burden would be feeling like I'm not providing enough, which is currently would be the thing. There'll a time. I can't really go into the.
But by what standard? Who decides if it's enough?
Oh, by the standards of what you're used to, what you would, what people kind of want. Everyone in my family is pretty reasonable, but it does come down to me to provide the lion's share of the money for everything we do. And I don't mind that at all. I relish that. But in the situation I find myself in now, which is financially a vulnerable situation. So you stop doing something that earns you good money in order to prospect, to sort of like create something new, but you're living in this transitionary period where the outcome is unknown, and but that's you're weighing the burden of that because everyone is in your family is relying on you at the level you were previously, let's say. You know what I mean? So I don't feel like it. I've never thought of it as a negative thing to provide for my family. I think I really enjoy it. Yeah, I love it. But when it's not as abundant, it's a strain because you want it to be abundant, you want it to be fast, but you're taking a risk because you have to risk. You have to speculate to accumulate, don't you? But it's not just you taking a risk for you. You're taking a risk for some other people as well. And so
there's the element of like living with the uncertainty of the future.
It's 100% that. Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Which is a lot of that because future doesn't exist. So a lot of that is like about what stories do you create around that. And if you create like the worst kind of stories, that can be very stressful, I would imagine. Thinking what could happen.
Right, for example, I'd go back to my daughter and riding boots and riding and horses and all this kind of stuff. She rides with a particular group of girls. Fathers are all very successful.
I get it.
They all get the best boots, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm the father providing for her, that's a tough call for me to see other men creating abundance for their daughter while I'm in this position where I'm deciding to not. It's almost like for a personal reason. It is a personal reason. It's a calling. It's an intention to. I know myself. I know when I'm doing the wrong thing. I've got to, if you look back over the history of my life, there's been some very obvious times when I stopped doing one thing and started doing another, and in the end, it all worked out fine. But in the interim period, I can live on a sofa. My family can't. You know what I mean?
So here's the thing. I think it's not our job as parents to provide the perfect life for our children and to give them everything that materially that they want. A way more important lesson, I think, is for your children to show them that you can actually make changes to your life as you're doing, to prioritize your own happiness. Because actually, for children, what would you choose, a rich father or a happy father that has a happy, fulfilled life?
Very correct.
That is the abundance that you will give them by you being fulfilled. And that is how you will provide the safety that they need. And whether the riding boots are $300 or $80, ultimately that will be forgotten. It's obviously who the fuck cares, right?
Yeah, no, it was
in
an
the long
example.
run. I know, but it is an important example right now. But the big picture thing is, for your kids, what matters way more is to show them you can actually take risks in your life. You don't settle for the easy option. You could take a bank job right now and probably make like double or triple of what you're making now, or be in corporate, whatever. Would that be better for your kids? No. Who would come home like a drained guy that's just like thrown his dream away? So that's not what you want to show them. So by you pursuing this, you're showing the kids the things that matter and the abundance. And anyway, the abundance will come, because you said in the past, when you've ever done this, it all fell into place. Yes, it might be a little rocky in between. That will be the lesson for them.
That's a good way of looking at it, actually. The only difference is, in the past, like I say, I never had the responsibility of other people.
Yeah, but you have the responsibility to show them how to live life.
It's true, 100%. And I agree. Sometimes, though, you can imagine the conversation. It's like, Dad, all the other girls have got a $10,000 horse, and you're like, I know, and I would love that as well. Mm-hmm. But, I'm happy.
Yeah. You know what?
They probably wouldn't understand that.
That is such a good conversation to have, because that's the reality. I mean, we don't always get what we want. And if you did, I think I would argue it's worse for kids. I spent some time at a private boarding school in Germany for like extremely like privileged, whatever, rich kids. And never have I met more messed up people and more messed up families.
Sure, yeah.
The kids who literally got everything they wanted and like a Bentley for their 18th birthday. And did it make them happier in life? Radically, no. Absolutely not.
You're absolutely right. The thing I was thinking of then was, that's it. Here's the problem. I believe I could achieve all of it, though. That's the thing. That's
will.
But it's not. But that doesn't resolve it right now. That's the problem. It's this period of time, and when you've got kids, you think to yourself, say this plan was going to take 3 years. That's age, in my daughter's case, age 12 to age 15. That's a big, important period of time where my decision to earn less money and then build it back up again is affecting her in a large percentage of her life in an important time. May have been a bad decision. Maybe I should have sucked it up, done the thing, carried on doing it, not done this. But that's not true. Of course I do, because I've done it.
Yeah,
I'm not stupid.
Yeah,
but that's what Liz talks about when we discuss it.
Yeah.
It's a concern for her. Look, because we have ideas for our kids, and they involve our resources. So, for example, going back to horse riding again, part of the reason why we were very forthright in getting Alice into horse riding is because of the culture of horse riders, right? You don't find woke horse riders, they don't exist. Not around where we live, and as far as I can tell anywhere. It's a very good way of insulating your kids against certain mind viruses. Same with horse riders, they're all hard workers. You might, at one end of the scale, like if you go to the kind of super rich, you might get a bunch of gnarly people, but we're not. We're at the sort of English farming level, where you get super well-adjusted kids who learn how to look after a large animal at a very young age. They have to get up at 6 a.m. and muck it out. They can't not do it. It's not like a dog. Someone else is going to do it. No, I ain't going to muck your horse out, So there's all these really good characteristics that you can inspire in a child by getting them involved in this world. But it's expensive.
Yeah, but I mean,
right. But if if I'm not providing that at a young age, there's more to it than just little Annie hasn't got her dream horse.
Yeah, but ironically, all those experiences that you're describing, like grit and determination and like hard work, I mean, those are very, very available to people who are poverty level, right? Their children can very easily experience that and have this character building experience, and it doesn't involve an expensive horse. So those experiences will always be available to your children. And I would argue that like the less money you make, the more available these experiences will be. The other thing is the protection against the woke mind virus and kind of sheltering our kids. I also think that, we can't take care of everything for them, and they have to be exposed somehow. Like, this is the reality of the world. There's a lot of people who have radically different opinions from us. And there's a level of trust that we have to give the kids that they will find their own way. And if your kids suddenly decide to go woke, I mean, are you going to love them any less? I mean, it's ultimately it's on them. You can't correct for all variables. And life is taking a risk. So I think if they're actually exposed to those arguments, it's the number one thing is always going to be your relationship with the kids. So will they come to you to discuss things? If yes, then you've already won. And if no, then it doesn't matter if you can shut them off in a nuclear bunker with like Jordan Peterson as their personal coach. It doesn't matter because your relationship with them is broken. Right? Oh my God, a horrible punishment.
I mean, I love JP, but that sounds like a complete nightmare.
Yes, it was very hyperbolic. So, why not have woke friends? I mean, my husband, he's just brilliant. He always says, like, I like woke friends because I like to hear these opinions, and I don't want to be part of this. What is like wokeism? It's only there to divide us, actually. It's to say it's us against them because they have these outrageous woke ideas and we're not like them, Why not flip that narrative on its head and say, I can be best friends with a woke person and it's totally fine. We can have a coffee and enjoy it and listen to each other and just like have a dialogue. And it's not about necessarily convincing each other, but like be playful with all that stuff. If it has such an emotional charge where again you're going into war with it, something is triggered that
I
we
think
should
it's
look
different when you're talking about children, because in my case, if I didn't give my daughter any other opinions, she would adopt that, I think, because it's very prevalent around. And there's I mean bad ideas. I don't even care if it's woke or it's Marxism or it's whatever. It's just bad ideas that make you ask questions about yourself, which you don't need to ask, which can lead to problems, right? So, like we've grounded all our kids in just simple, hardworking tasks and this, that, and the other, and the blah, blah, blah. Then, sure, they go to school and the teachers are talking, to them about all kinds of things which are complete insanity as far as I can tell. I don't really understand how people have been hoodwinked into some of these ideas. But they've got this foundation of, well, when I come home, I've just got to, what is it? Chop wood before enlightenment, chop wood after enlightenment. You know what I mean? Like it's that. It's always there. And suddenly, the idea that men can give birth doesn't make sense when you're grooming a horse and clearing up its shit. Right. It makes absolutely no sense at all. It makes no sense even when you're kind of out amongst people. Yeah. But when you're a child, you can believe all kinds of things. I could convince my kids that anything is true. So I want to ground them in the real world of what people have done for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, rightly so. And the real world also involves people who will think of it totally differently. And I think the most important thing is just like dialogue and openness, and then trusting yourself. So harnessing the things that we talked about in the first half, your gut feeling, your intuition, not that also goes with not succumbing to peer pressure, because then you will be a very strong individual. You will really follow only your own lead, which is, that's really crucial with this. But I don't think, sheltering them from wokeism, because they need to understand, like, these are valid opinions out there. Sure, people have them. That's fine. And I can have totally different ones, and we can coexist.
Can we? Got someone with blue hair screaming in your face.
So, and how would that make you feel? How would it make you feel?
Well, I'm pretty it's not about me. It's about my kids. Like, if someone with blue hair was screaming in my face, I'm a Nazi, it would have not much effect on me. I would really be struggling. In that moment, my urge is to understand that person, but I think I probably already do. So it wouldn't have been much importance. However, my daughters or my son, who is very young, and when a teacher says to them at school that, even just sexes or gender and like redefining terms that have been around for a long time, which made life easy to navigate. Right. Yeah. They were there, and this is why I have a particular sort of gripe with these kind of ideas, is because they are making life harder to navigate. And when you take it to the extreme, like there's no truth anymore at all, is there, in this ideology? And that's really bad for kids especially, but for everyone that's bad. Like, you and me can converse with each other because there's a couple of quite a few fundamental things. We're anarchists right now, aren't we? We're being completely anarchistic. Because we have all these foundational ideas, which mean that we'll sit and talk and drink coffee and discuss, and I hear you and you hear me, and but when there's no truth in the world, when everything is deliberately non-truthful, that's not, in my experience anyway, a good foundation to give kids.
Without a doubt. You don't have to convince me of that, or I'm sure anybody who's listening, but what a wonderful opportunity to show children that even an authority figure like a teacher can be questioned. All right, so let's at home explore these ideas and see if they truly hold water. And just because somebody's a teacher and like 20 times over a professor, that doesn't mean anything at all. And we don't have to have the same opinion as them. We don't have to obey them. And what a invaluable lesson for life. Question authority.
Interestingly, we've had that discussion. And guess what her answer was?
What?
Well, she said, I don't want the hassle of getting called out in class.
And that's fine. That's her preference. And I would say
that's the truth in real life as well, when you're older, isn't it?
But I would say it's also good because you are protecting yourself. You're prioritizing, like, you meet yourself where you're at. If your body doesn't feel safe in such a situation to stand up and have a fight, confrontation with the teacher, very few of us would feel good doing that. I would say it's like almost like a psychopathic trait. It's like in a hostile environment. Yeah, because you're an adult, but as an 11-year-old, that's it. So, but that's fine. And you can also recognize, like, hey, there's a place to voice my opinions, and this is not it. I would not feel safe doing that. You just honor what you need in that moment. So I think your kid is doing fantastic. And if you guys can have open conversations about all of that and carry it through to the teenage years, that's my dream. With my daughter, she's 10. So she's like on the threshold of kind of the next stage where I'm sure there will also come like rebellion against my opinions. And maybe she will go full woke, and I need to be okay with that.
But there's the trick, you see. Whenever my daughter asks me about something or we have a discussion, I offer both sides of the story. And you can't argue with both sides of the story. You can't argue. You say, there are people that believe this, and there are people that believe this. It's like a life hack with kids. And you don't even have to mention what you believe. No. But because if you've taught them critical thinking, they'll come to the conclusion, because you can discuss it down to the truth quite easily, Okay. Is that it on money? We've got one more here. How we think and feel about money, what it says about us, What does it say about us then, if we find it hard to tune into abundance?
It says that you're grounded in scarcity and you're limiting yourself, you're limiting your life experiences. And it really says nothing about the external. It doesn't mean that the world is against you or that you have to fight for everything you got and be in this victim consciousness. It's really, everything comes down to you have a choice of how to think about yourself and how to think about money. And like I described, those experiences that could be extremely unpleasant, like paying your taxes, you even have a choice to reframe those and get into more of a playful relationship about money. And I also believe everything will work out. I kind of believe that I will get the experiences that I need to get in this 3D realm. And maybe if one of those experiences is like existential poverty, maybe that's something that I need to learn in my lifetime. And the other truth is, if we're in our absolute comfort zone and everything is peachy, then we don't really grow from that because there is no reason to. It is the hardship that makes us. And that is why, in hindsight, I'm really grateful everything that happened with, for example, COVID, the lockdowns, the insane restrictions. Like, I was really suffering during that time, but now I'm like, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it forced me to go within. And I think a lot of the times, you even have these like famous cases of people, stepped on a landmine, lost both legs and an arm. 10 years later, they tell you that was the best thing that happened to me in my life. So I think that maybe takes the fear out of the relationship with money to just think about it as, if it's here, great. And if it's not here, that can also be great.
You're absolutely right. Yes. COVID has been a phenomenal force, tour de force on most people. The number of people who I speak to, even on this podcast, who were radicalized by COVID is at 70%. And the most common experience is that prior to COVID, people, were predisposed to freedom, but it was only when they were told to stay back at home and all that they actually realized that it was something worth thinking about. I was going to say fighting for. I won't now. It's not worth fighting for at all. It's worth creating in your life.
Yes, it's worth creating for.
Yes.
What a beautiful reframe.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, final question. Trauma. Well, we kind of been doing this, haven't we? Trauma, unhelpful narrative building and how to transcend it. My take on that would be going back to the body. Trauma resides in the body on the whole. And if you're not in touch with your body, you don't notice it. There's the problem. And you use narrative building to cope with it, and it can be unhelpful. And the way to transcend it is to get back in touch with your body.
Back in touch with the body. And also, I think a good one is to recognize that there's no bad part of you, even if there's a part of you that holds on to anger or jealousy or any other shameful emotion. It's actually, there's a reason why it's there. And at some point it was helpful to protect you, maybe in your childhood, or maybe when you became a people pleaser, it served a purpose.
You were a people pleaser, weren't you?
Yes.
No, we had that conversation ages ago.
Yeah.
Do you remember? As the first time I think we spoke, probably about 2 years ago, I came to your apartment.
Yeah.
And you were talking about, you came from a history of people pleasing, and you kind of had to kind of work out why it was and then let go of it, basically.
Yeah, it's, first of all, you got to realize it's there, because normally when something has been your lived experience for a couple decades, you don't even see it. This is your mode of operating. That's why self-inquiry is all right, you turn the mirror on yourself and say, wait, what am I actually doing? Why am I doing this? And do these behaviors do they serve me now? Usually, you can also find that out by, again, tuning into your body. Something just doesn't feel right on a visceral level. And if it comes up often, those are the behaviors that are worthy taking a close look at. And for me, that was definitely one. And I feel like I will never stop learning that lesson, probably for the rest of my life. That's something that I have to keep looking at. It's also we're never a finished product. It's not the goal. The goal is to kind of stay curious about ourselves and kind of get to know ourselves. And when these feelings raise their head, you just say, hello, darkness, my old friend. Here it is. here it is, and that's okay. And just because that feeling is there, I don't need to act on it. It's removing reactivity from the equation and like respond more intelligently in a more informed, conscious way.
And what about narrative building? Because if you build the wrong narrative and then live by it, and I would say my recent revelation about I built this narrative about what I wanted, and actually it wasn't true. It was a coping mechanism, because what I wanted was very difficult, I think, probably. And also what I wanted took me out of my comfort zone massively, which is a huge incentive. Like you say, in one sense we're all striving to find a comfort zone, but then once we live in it,
it gets stagnant.
Nothing happens. You ossify.
It's also, the truth is that our nervous system is here to protect us, and if there's an unfamiliar experience, it can label it as dangerous because it wants to keep us safe. So I'm also saying there's no bad parts of us if there's uncomfort with uncertainty or with risk. I mean, it makes sense. Yes, of course, you want to stay in the cave and not hunt the mammoth because you can die, but then also you don't grow. So the narratives, as you said, they're just fabrications. They don't need to be bad or good. They're just something to protect us. And if we never explore them, then you feel like this is reality. Then they run you and you don't run them. The good thing is that you can always reframe your narrative to serve you in a better way, to get yourself out of victim consciousness, which I feel like that is the most prevalent narrative.
It is.
Now, whenever there is something like, you feel like you have to do the dishes, or I have to pay taxes, ultimately, that's a story that we tell ourselves. There's always a choice.
It is very prevalent, victim consciousness, isn't it? And it's also being incentivized. It's being rewarded. Not only in simple things like on social media, but it's being rewarded in legislation, isn't it, these days? Like being considered as an underdog gives you benefits now.
Yes.
Well, it does. I mean, and you can class yourself as a victim in so many ways now.
It is voluntarily giving up your power, which is a strange concept when you think about it, because we all want to be empowered, but then it comes with a risk, yes, of failing, of doing things wrong. And of course, when you're a victim, then nothing is your fault.
I know.
So you don't have to be accountable for anything. So it is a comfortable position to rest in.
Yeah, but it's also a powerful position in a way. It imbues power. I mean, I think unfortunately, the root of it is a lack of competitiveness on your own part, isn't it? If you can't compete in the real world, the best option that some people have is to compete with the backing of other people, which is what a victim does.
I suppose. I mean, it's easier to say I'm a victim than to say I failed, or I'm less good than the other people, or I'm going to try harder.
Yeah.
Yes. I would say that victim consciousness, it actually, because I mentioned trauma, trauma can also be like victim-based, because you can also say there is something in my past. Let's say your parents abused you, like a very obviously significant trauma, and that's why I'm like this, which also abdicates your responsibility over right now and gives it to some past events. I think trauma is real, but if you focus on it way too much, it can also mean giving up your power to that. Because the truth is, the way we behave now, we always behave in a way that serves us in a certain way, that meets our goals in certain. And so let's say somebody is a recluse, has like agoraphobia, stays in their apartment, and they say it's because my parents abused me and I never thought I was good enough. The truth is, they maybe don't want to compete out there in the marketplace and meet other people. So they tell themselves this: I am a victim because I was so traumatized by my parents. This is why I stay here.
It comes back to responsibility again, like you say. Rights and responsibility, isn't it? Rights.
And choice, always choice. I mean, that's just another word for basically the same thing. I mean, responsibility necessitates choice because you live with
But that's
consequences.
why victim mentalities are always requesting rights, because the other end of the scale to responsibility.
Yes.
If you can, a victim mentality requires rights, whereas a responsible attitude doesn't require rights.
That's
It
right.
requires responsibility. I think I might end it there.
Do it.
Responsibility is a good way to end. Thanks, Pavla, again for coming. Number 3, you're the most.
Wow.
You're actually the most spoken to guest on this podcast.
Are you
actually,
serious?
No, you're not.
I'm
I'm not.
No.
Peter is actually. Of
Okay,
course,
I'll have to kill him. So I'm number 1.
But I think he's only done 3. Maybe Titus has done 3, maybe 4. But that's fine as far as I'm concerned. I think I like all these conversations. I think actually in this kind of a movement, these conversations probably happen a lot less than they should as well, because there's a certain type of logical person that walks these corridors who probably hasn't thought about any of these things, and quite rightly so, but they are important. So thanks for coming down. Thanks for your advice as per normal, and I'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim.